Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Game Souk. We had a break last week. We have a lot to talk about this week. We've been trying to kind of sift the most important topics to the top of the list, but we're going to kick off with the war and the market and where we are because I feel like we're just living headline to headline in the markets right now. There are also a lot of concerns around the IPO market. We've had a lot of questions about Discord and others. So, Mike, give us an update. Where are we?
Yeah, let's set those very slightly related in the sense of liquidity with respect to the IPO market, but let's just separate those for a second. And obviously, we could spend an entire half hour talking about sort of what's happening geopolitically and how that's impacting various parts of the market. But I'm going to try to limit this to about a minute, if that's okay for folks. There's obviously been plenty of angst in markets. It sort of feels like a one-factor market, meaning everybody's watching the price of oil and what's happening with that. We are in the middle of, and it will extend into. Certainly through the weekend and into next week, this kind of critical period of figuring out the duration of the conflict in war in Iran, where obviously this sort of Monday morning event where sort of Trump, I'm going to politely say asserted the talks were underway, authoritatively asserted that talks were underway to quote unquote end the conflict, has, I would say, taken on increasing scrutiny, if I'm being polite. But the doubts are really there that, that would range. The spectrum would be, I would say, from him willing something into existence that wasn't yet in existence, meaning I'm just going to say it and then backfill with the actual activity. All the way, that would be the most constructive, and where there's been some follow through on that, which is worth watching, is Pakistan as well as Egypt and perhaps Turkey. Although I know Pakistan and Egypt, and Pakistan's the lead, have been offering to host talks, and rather that be the previously not very successful talks faced by Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, J.D. Vance may be the face of those talks. That's the most positive. The most negative interpretation would be that this 5-day pause relative to the threat of destroying Iranian energy infrastructure and desalination plants, which incidentally is a war crime, but we'll leave that alone. The worst case scenario would be that this is all a stalling mechanism to get troops into the region. And if we land in that situation, then I'm not going to predict that the bottom will fall out, but these of equities and that sort of thing, which have been pretty resilient, frankly. But certainly the sort of $150 to $200 Brent scenario comes into play, and who knows what the sort of end game is for that. In the set, we can use words like quagmire and that sort of thing. So that's the spectrum. We're going to know where we sit on that spectrum in the next, certainly 7 to 8 days, but potentially this weekend. So it's a very, very important weekend for that. What's showing up at the same time is that there's just an unwillingness for institutional participants to hold risk through this period. We're approaching month end and quarter end of what started out as a very good year for a lot of people in Jan and Feb, and March has been a disaster. So, and it doesn't really, the only exception to that, which a lot of our friends and listeners are probably paying attention to, is that crypto assets have distinguished themselves as, or sort of in some respects replaced gold as one of the safer assets through this conflict, in part because many of the holders of gold, including global central banks, but also Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds, need liquidity. And so when you need liquidity, there's sort of a last in, first out phenomenon, and that's what they had stocked up on. So gold has not held its value, and in many respects, Bitcoin has, Ethereum has, Solana has. And there's also, which we're not going to get sidetracked on right now, but there's been some developments around the market structure bill as well, which have been a negative for stablecoin issuers, but probably a positive for the crypto ecosystem more broadly. So that was a lot more than a minute on what's been happening with the Iran war and the sort of macro impact, but that's sort of what's feeding the system. And this is a very high volatility period, and it's going to stay that way at best through next week and potentially indefinitely.
Yeah, I just want to add a comment for context, given this is a media and gaming audience. Just put those oil prices in context, because right now it doesn't seem like the price of oil has gone up too much. We're around $100, and you're talking 150 to 200. That would be a massive move. Why haven't, even though there's been a lot of drama around, Trump's headlines and others' headlines, why hasn't it moved higher?
That's still a decent sized move. I think from what's impacting the economy and impacting the political economy is, gas prices in the U.S. have gone up over $1 now and continue to trend in that direction. But what I would say is that not all, like these benchmark prices that we talk about when you say 100, I think Brent is a little bit above that right now. Not all customers face the same price. So in Asia, in particular, which has been the most sensitive to these shutdowns, the blends that they face are like Oman and Dubai crude, and Oman crude is already above 150, right? So it's up more than 100%. Okay, so it sort of depends where you are and what you're consuming. The U.S. is self-contained in terms of oil production. Like we're a very slight net exporter, but obviously global. Energy prices are set globally. So it is not as big of a squeeze around here. I think that the other thing to say, which is probably the most important market phenomenon, is what happens here is really a function of duration. Meaning the longer this conflict lasts, the more displacement there's going to be of both storage and production infrastructure. And the more of that there is, the longer it will take to restore the market conditions that were, preceded the war. So that is sort of why last Wednesday and Thursday, people who I would take that most constructive or the most positive view of the conflict would assert that was the peak of the conflict, which was when the Israelis destroyed an important piece of Iranian gas, an important Iranian gas field, the Pars field, and in retaliation, Iran destroyed 2 trains of a Qatari LNG facility, which is going to take 5 years to rebuild. Right. So if Qatar is, let's call it 30% of Europe's LNG, and 30% of that is destroyed, and it'll take 5 years, that is single-digit percent, which is a lot of the normal supply that is going to be offline for 5 years. That has a real impact, and that's sort of the point of thinking about duration. So the longer this lasts, the worse it is, but it's not, the pain is not felt equally by everyone globally.
And it could be early in terms of pain if some of this impact is permanent for that long.
For sure.
So, okay, let's switch to big news out of Roblox, James. Our Game Souk card says it all. Roblox is taking a cut out of all branded integrations starting in 2027. Is this a cash grab, as we demonstrated on our card, or will they walk it back? What's happening here?
Yeah, so last week, the back end of last week, they announced that you're going to have to register all brand integrations from May this year, and then from January 27, you're going to have to pay a fee as the developer, not as the brand. The developer has to pay a fee. So essentially, they want to take a cut of the brand integration. We don't know what the fee is going to be yet, but what we do know is that it's going to scale based on your DAU and based on your demographic. So if you have a game that is like a million DAU and you have 40% US, it's going to be a lot more expensive than if you had 20% US. And so I think there's been, both sides of the argument have been this is good because Roblox is saying that they're going to help regulate ads. They're going to help advise brands what is a good price and what is, a bad price, and supposedly make it easier for brands to enter the space. And then the flip side is obviously they could do all of that without taking any of a cut. Like, the absolute flip side of that is YouTube announced pretty much the same thing this week, but they're not taking a cut. They are just priding themselves with helping brands enter the space and find creators that match themselves, which is, what I feel Roblox should be going towards.
Tell us more about the YouTube announcement, because I think that's something that people might have overlooked.
So YouTube announced, I forget the name it used to be called, but like it's basically a creator platform that as a brand you can go and sign up to, and you could say, hey, like I'm Olipop, I want to be in contact with food and drink creators, and they're using, I think it's Gemini, to help match brands with YouTubers of a certain size that fits their budget, that is food and drink and stuff like that. And so brands can effectively like shop for creators. They can contact them directly from this dashboard. But also on the flip side, as a creator, if you're like, I'm down to do some brand activations, you can shop for brands as well. So you can see Olipop is willing to pay, like $2 CPM. They want you to talk about their new flavor, and you can like apply to it or sign up to it, and then the brand can approve you or disapprove you. So, YouTube are going down the route of let's try and make it as easy as possible to connect as many creators and as many brands together, knowing that, brands will come and spend more money on the platform, because they're likely not just spending with the creator. I think that's like the most important thing. They are most likely spending on like normal YouTube ads as well, like the pre-rolls, and the ones that come at the end of the video and all that type of stuff. So I think YouTube's stance is much stronger than Roblox is, especially with the fees that Roblox already take. So the actual breakdown, I think a lot of people will see it as like 70-30, and that is what Roblox like pride themselves at, but 70 in favor of the developer and 30 in favor of the platform. But there's like not actually the real case. So yes, that is the case if you buy directly in a game, a developer gets 70% and then Roblox gets 30%. But if you then want to like exchange it and take it off the platform, that's called a developer exchange, so DevEx. They actually take even more. And so the example I used on LinkedIn this week was, if a player spends $10 inside a Roblox game, the platform takes 30%, so that's like $3, and the developer gets $7. But after the DevEx conversion, the developer actually walks away with $2.92. So I'll be generous to Roblox and I'll round up to $3. So Roblox are taking $7 and the developer's taking $3, and off of that $10. And the only place that's been untouched, realistically, is with brands, where some smaller games that maybe don't earn as much have been topping up with maybe like 5 to 10k integrations for like 4 weeks, and then obviously some of the larger ones have been into the 7 figures. And Roblox are, I think, seeing the larger ones and saying, well, we deserve a cut of that because we made the platform, which I think there's probably an argument to say yes, but I'm in the camp of I believe they could do everything they're trying to do without taking a cut of it.
And I think a lot of people agree with you. Creek posted a lot of influencers and big kind of voices in Roblox have posted, and sometimes Roblox puts like kind of drops a bomb and finds out how it goes, and then they walk things back. Do you think that's going to happen? That was my initial take on this, is they're going to walk this back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on who in the community pushes back. So Roblox corporates see the community split into two. They have the professional studios, so Sawhorse, GameFam, the gang, like all the people that anyone listening to this has probably seen on LinkedIn. And then you have the native community that spend a lot of time on Twitter and Discord and stuff like that. Often when there's a big outcry from the native community, there very often isn't many things walked back, because it is seen as they're players, they'll get over it, they'll move on. Key thing being the UGC price used to be 10 cents to publish. They changed it to $1 back in 2022. Huge outcry, and nothing really changed. With this one, the professional studios that have the ear of Roblox, that are, go to Roblox headquarters, often, are the ones that are pitching Roblox to the brands, are upset about this. I think, lucky enough that I run a news account on Twitter that gets a lot of leaked stuff, rightly or wrongly, to me, and multiple professional studios leaked this news to me before it came out, and we spoke about it privately last week, and they're like really unhappy, like very, very unhappy. This really affects their business model drastically. And so I feel like if you have all the professional studios that are singing your praises and doing the hard work to bring the brands in are upset, then yeah, I think it'll probably be walked back or adjusted is probably what it'll be.
Yep. Ooh, it'll be definitely drama. Go ahead, Deleza.
Yeah, I wanted to just note that, the thing that really, like, the contrast for me between YouTube and Roblox here is the YouTube scenario actually helps the smaller mid-tier YouTubers most of all. And that's what's so brilliant about what they went and did here. I mean, it's high time they start actually taking care of the community. But to see Roblox sort of make such a harsh, I would say like a harsh cash grab from their own creator community, it's I don't even know how it's even legal, honestly, because it's something that it doesn't legally actually sit right, that you could take a piece out of something they had no part in negotiating, planning, or have any sense of ownership in, period. The only thing that they could take a cut of legally is their revenues within their game from their platform, from the services that they provide. This is one where I would just go like, is it even legal?
Is this another toll booth that Apple and Google had to fight Epic Games on for the last 5 years,
Yeah, and where's our Tim Sweeney? That's the other one. It's like, James, which one of these is going to be our Tim Sweeney of this situation? Because we certainly need a voice like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to, speaking of Tim Sweeney, Epic Games. Keshav, tons has happened on the Epic Games front this week. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, sure. So definitely two big headlines from Epic. The first one, they've finally come back on Android globally. So as of last week, I think that was almost a week when Epic said that they're finally onboarded. People can download the app and they can start playing games. And I think within 24 or 48 hours of coming back on Android, Tim Sweeney tweeted that 47% of new players inside of Fortnite as of now are from, you can see that they're newer players and they're all from Android. So this shows that this is the mobile space that Fortnite was missing, right? Like they've not been on mobile devices for quite some time now, like 5 years, including right after the lockdown or like right after COVID. So this shows the impact, right? Like the instant impact that you can see. And there's also reports that for most of these games, uh, the mobile division or the mobile app is the highest in margins. So I feel like this definitely puts Fortnite back in that competition, especially on the creative side with all the other apps out there, including Roblox. Um, no,
Yeah.
I know Xandros was following this closely as well. Xandros, is there anything else that you've seen where people have started playing it on mobile devices again?
Yeah, I think the Tim Sweeney quote is the 47% is almost the most concrete stats we have on how many people are joining back through Android. But I mean, we can guesstimate that this will be a huge improvement for Fortnite and Epic Games to be able to reach larger audiences again. And I think over the next few months, we'll see that those improvements coming through in their numbers and engagement in UEFN and Epic's official games as well. So I think it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, let's go to
Yeah.
the big news. The big news out of Epic. They laid off 1,000 people, and it became controversial because it's 20% of the staff related to Fortnite, the game. And again, our thesis in line with kind of the kind of the thesis that Tim Sweeney's been talking about for 6 years, 7 years now is this idea that Fortnite will become just one game on the larger platform, which is the larger playground, which is the platform. And as we all know, the company's been putting tremendous resource into UEFN and independent creators on the platform. And we just, as we announced about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago before GDC, we made our first big bet into Bloom Games for Zombie Escape Tag. We're really excited about that. But this, laying off 1,000 people, it could be that, I mean, my gut was, yeah, big games, if they're not cutting costs at this point, what are they doing? I mean, there's so many ways to cut costs using new tools, AI. There are a lot of ways to cut costs, and also the backbeat of game development is really independent and UGC. And UGC doesn't take 3 to 5 years. It doesn't take, a few $100 million. This is kind of the way the world is going. So my view was, yeah, that makes sense. But there were a lot of other views out there. What do you guys think? Who wants to chime in?
I mean, I'll just say that, from people I know who are going to feel the squeeze, being creatives and up and coming talent developers, it is incredibly hard to find a job. And anytime you hear about, more job loss, you're going to feel the pain. This is going to be a continued trend. And I think we're going to face like a employment crisis on the horizon, not just across any kind of service or creative industry, because it is vastly changing. So I think that for companies it makes all the sense in the world. But as we pull into the 1% and disregard the rest of the communities, we're gonna, the politics aren't gonna get less. Let's put it that way. I think we're getting into further hotbeds of politics that are honestly, for most people, pressing, disturbing, confusing, distressing, and UGC is not the answer for cannot be the answer for everyone, because it is a limited amount of people who can win in these spaces.
Yep.
Okay,
I think also,
that's another debate.
yeah.
Go ahead, Keshav.
Yeah, I think also it's great to note that Tim Sweeney highlights in his letter, just saying that this isn't these are the times where he has to talk about this, that this isn't an AI related layoff, which is something that he specifically said, that this isn't because we're replacing these roles. He talks about how they've been in the vanguard for the whole industry over the past 5 years. They've been fighting the battle for everyone, and that has definitely put some pressure on the financials of the company. They also talk about, he mentions that there might be some lower engagement in Fortnite, but I was going through this Verge article, and they talk about how Fortnite is still one of the biggest games, one of the biggest live services games out there. Obviously, because it's such a huge game. The updates and the content and being relevant is also then an expensive affair. And this is the real reason where they quote Statista's estimates of revenues and how Fortnite is doing really well in bringing in the numbers, but still, if you're bringing in as much and the scale at which your company is operating, those margins are something that now for Fortnite's trying to figure out. And I think that's what led to this layoff, where they're gonna be the same company. They're gonna have the same ethics. They're gonna have the same principles, and they're working towards the same goal. It's just with 1,000 fewer people, because they believe that would help expand on their vision. So in the end, like I felt like this was still a big positive, especially given that this gives you the runway, this gives you the agility to move into these different modes and different experiments that you're trying to do.
Yeah, and speaking of the modes, that they removed, rocket racing, ballistic, festival battle stage, and people, there were a lot of people who were obviously, upset about that. But I did think that the Matthew Zanazzo, by the way, we love him. He always gives us a good kind of encapsulation of what's happening here. And in rocket racing, he said it's moving to UEFN. Epic is not abandoning racing, they're moving it to creators. And so I think that is a backbeat here that they can't be too loud about, but is clearly happening.
And also, of all these modes, they still kept the live event mode because they believe that that is something that still works really well for them. This shows that they're basically placing their bets on things that are still working and trying to build them better. And these modes that they're shutting down, like for example, Rocket Racing, all of these assets that were from Rocket League, they will be available for creators to build experiences out of. So in the end, Epic doesn't have to spend money to keep Rocket League or the assets of Rocket League alive. They're giving it to the creators out there. They're adding they're adding the mechanisms to build racing games instead of Fortnite. So in the end, those games will come back. But it's just that it won't be on Epic's. It won't affect Epic's margins. It'll just bolster the platform as a whole. So
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
gonna put James on the spot right here because I think he might have a different opinion. And yeah, James, what do you think about these
Uh,
layoffs?
I mean, I think it's like, I don't think it's a good thing for them. I don't think layoffs are ever a good thing, and I think it's very much like Prometheus, that they've gone a little bit too close to the sun. I think, Fortnite a couple of years ago, they had real big ambitions to bring fantastic IP to their platform, which they have. Like, the Star Wars is on there. I've got like 100 Star Wars Funkos behind me. And I think when they decided to make everyone be able to use and play with these, that people would go ahead and create very cool games or core loops with the IP that they had, like Lego and Star Wars and stuff like that. I think what has happened is developers have, like, Fortnite developer or UFN developers, sorry, have seen how successful Roblox developers are and gone, I'm just going to recreate that. And Fortnite or UEFN has like turned into Roblox 2.0 with just better monetization. Like, they have a much better split than what Roblox does, like, for sure. And I think that's shown in, like, the number one UGC game is Steal a Brain Rot, which is like number 3 on Roblox at the moment. But like at the time, at one point, it was number 1 on Roblox and number 2 on and number 1 on Fortnite. And I think they're now just so close to Roblox that people are like, well, if I want to play Roblox, I'll go play Roblox. And I think in the comments, Twitter's unforgiving. A lot of people have a lot of the community have brought that up, that it doesn't feel like it used to a few years ago. And I think the standard has dropped.
I mean, it just feels like we keep getting marginal positive. There's a positive drumbeat with Epic. This is obviously not positive, laying off 1,000 people, but just in terms of the tools that developers have on UEFN, the fact that they can sell assets, there haven't been kind of the same privacy, age verification, etc. Issues so far. We have, speaking of, let's talk about kind of the negative backbeat on Roblox continued also this week, and I want to go back to it. Not only is Roblox taking a cut of every brand integration, what's happening in Brazil and the Philippines? I mean,
Yeah.
we forgot to mention that.
So we can start with Brazil first because it's actually happened. So Brazil on Monday had, and this doesn't just impact just Roblox, but gaming and platforms as a whole. But Roblox rolled out a digital child and adolescent law, basically, very similar to what we're seeing across the rest of the world. The internet's dangerous. Everyone's got to verify, and Roblox fell into that because Roblox has loot box mechanics similar to CS, similar to many games. They they had to restrict those games to 18 plus in Brazil, which they did on Monday. They complied with it like straight away. And then later in the day on Monday, I forget what it's called, the Brazil Classificaco. I can't speak Spanish, everyone. I'm sorry.
They don't speak Spanish in Brazil.
Yeah, their game rating. Oh no, they speak Portuguese, don't they? Yeah, right. Sorry, I definitely can't speak Portuguese. Their game rating organization on the Google Play and App Store rated Roblox as 18 plus, like as a whole thing. So if you're under the age of 18 in Brazil and you already have it, you can still play. But if you're under the age of 18 and you didn't already have Roblox, you can't at the moment cannot download it. They are appealing it, and we should know some more information soon. And that is not to do with, I think that's very easy for people to take that snippet and say it's because Roblox is unsafe. It has been classified as that because of loot boxes and the loot box mechanic, like the gacha sort of mechanic and stuff like that. So that is why it has been rated there, because they see it as gambling. And I think there's always going to be like, some people believe it's gambling, some people believe that it's not gambling. So in Brazil, it is currently 18 plus, so that should hopefully change soon, because that's massive for Roblox. Second biggest audience on the platform. Obviously, they can still play. The ones that have already got it downloaded, they can still play on console, and they can still play on PC or laptop. But yeah, mobile app stores.
It's a huge market.
Yeah.
Feels like Roblox is taking a lot of the arrows first, and then kind of it flows through to the rest of the industry, it seems like.
Yeah.
But that was a big one. I want to go to OpenAI. I loved Fidji Simo's quote when she told employees, apparently in a internal memo, to abandon side quests. And I wanted to go to you, Mike, because I know you're very close to the situation here. What does this mean to you?
Well, this is an extension of, we spent a while talking in, I believe it was late January, maybe it was early Feb, about the Code Red memo from Sam Altman, which was basically, hey, we're playing catch up here, right? The most important, side quest, side project, whatever, that's being abandoned here is Sora, which is important for, transmedia and for gaming, obviously, as being one of the bigger AI image and video engines. And the reality is that, OpenAI is getting the joke, which Anthropic and frankly Gemini, as we've talked about, got a long time ago, which is you go where the money is. And where the money is enterprises and agentic use cases. And agentic use cases are principally, I'm going to call it prosumers and small businesses. Not generating slop, which is what most people use Sora for. It's like, what's the use case? It's, it's TikTok and it's Snap. And I had to think, I don't use Snap, but my kids do. And I had to think about that. And
they're using it for free.
They're using it for free, right? So this is the natural evolution. I don't think about this. And to me, it actually... the same principle applies to the Epic discussion and layoffs, particularly even though Tim Sweeney proactively disavowed that this has anything to do with AI. I call bullshit on that, but anyway.
I agree.
This is a very similar concept, which is all of these companies are on the cusp of facing meaningful market scrutiny, right? So margins matter. And using just proliferating tokens, right, which is very expensive for Sora and for similar projects that have no prospect of generating meaningful revenue, those are loss leaders, right? You can only acquire share for so long. And that's what that was intended to do. I don't frankly even view Sora as being well branded, other than you access it through, the same vehicles. But their movement towards the super app, and the super app is going to be agent forward, right? That is margin focused. So they're starting to act like a business, and acting like a business means, not as much profligate spending, not as many silly consumer first apps. And I don't want to diminish the value of things like Sora and Nano Banana and things like that, but show me where, like, if you think about the use cases for Nano Banana, which I've been a big advocate for a long time, it's adjacent to Notebook LM, right? Which people are willing to pay for meaningfully. Show me the OpenAI application that's adjacent to Sora that has a similar use case. It's coming, but now they're playing catch up. So I would argue that Anthropic is now the lead of the sort of native, sort of Gen AI native dedicated companies. I would argue that Anthropic is now the leader, even though OpenAI has the higher valuation. And the implications, at least in markets, are that all of this CapEx is going to have to be dialed back a little bit. Like they're just not like the ambitions that OpenAI had before. They're not going to have as much. And I think for Anthropic in particular, if anything, they haven't spent enough. Meaning their footprint, their compute footprint isn't big enough, and that's sort of what's happening here. So I think that's pretty important for the overall kind of trajectory here, but it's also being governed by, and you brought this up in the markets intro, Angie, that we are going to see these IPOs soon, and that's really going to matter. It's going to start with SpaceX, which they probably file maybe as early as tomorrow. But we're going to see it elsewhere as well. And with these guys starting to file for IPOs, they're going to be very margin conscious and think about these trajectories.
Mm-hmm. There's another point on Anthropic that we want to be watching. U.S. District Judge Rita Lynn, who said the government appeared to be punishing Anthropic for disclosing a Pentagon dispute. Can you comment on that, since you do have a background?
Yeah, I'm going to give 2 comments on that. Number one, it's very important in the, there's a lot of hand-wringing about, the Anthropic's relation with the DoD, and to just give a sense of the importance of that beyond just the case itself. When we, for literally years, have talked about Anthropic versus OpenAI, some of the feedback that you had, Angie, was that investors out there have had the view on Anthropic, like, oh, Trump doesn't like them, so I won't invest.
Yep.
And we are starting to move past that. In this case in particular, you've had one of the first instances of large companies, including Microsoft, filing amicus briefs that are basically middle fingers to the Trump administration, if I'm dumbing it down. So that it's a watershed moment in that respect. Also, as a personal note, to your point, the judge here, Rita Lynn, was both a high school. I went to a very small high school, and she was a high school classmate of mine, and was on the debate team with me. Not a surprise as she becomes a district court judge. I just couldn't be more proud to share a background with someone who's making a difference here in everything that we care about.
And you mentioned that her kind of clarity of thought and analysis should provide some comfort here.
She's a very clear thinker. She's a very safe pair of hands, regardless of your politics.
Yep, that's great. Eliza, what does this mean for AI slop? And you had some pretty strong views on this news on Sora.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't help to feel a little bit of a wee ding dong, the witch is dead. No, I mean, I do not see taking over creative work, especially the really creative parts, as value generating. I see it as, I think the most use cases you're finding is actually fraudulent content creation and streaming stealing. There's actually just recently a case that was about a guy who created AI music and essentially got bots to stream it and stole millions in royalties. So this sort of creating with AI for AI, just to game the systems, is more likely than the creative usage of them, because real creative is real creative. And so to me, I am very glad that it has not found enough traction, and it is and has been discarded as a sort of a non-starter, even on the business side. That's good. It's always good when business gets behind sensibility, which it should have. It's nice to be proven. It's nice to see it prove out that way. And then on other news of little vindications, it was not to be awful, but Meta had a hard week. But it is a vindication on the social aspect. It's good for humanity. Meta got fined. Meta was told to pay $375 million for misleading users over child safety. And in this case specifically, it was that about 16% of all Instagram users have reported seeing unwanted nudity or sexual activity in a week. So this I think, if anyone's a user, kind of already that this is an issue. So seeing it getting Meta, slapping the fingers of Meta as a little bit is good. On the other hand, as you, Angie, said to me when we were discussing this, it is a parking ticket for big companies, and often leads to nothing. However, a smaller case, but is actually potentially a bigger case, is that there was another case about Meta and YouTube being addictive. So, and in this scenario, they weren't fining the companies for like bad behavior or, that we call it, like, I guess it was in a way like, yes, hurting a personhood or, like personal distress kind of a scenario. But what they took to court was faulty product. What they said that this is bad design, this is faulty design, and that they should be held liable for their design choices. Now, to me, this is product. What do you call it?
Kind of an attack on the product.
Yeah, well, it's a product design scenario. So much like when you were
mention what it is. It's that these algorithms have
Yes.
these addictive features.
Yes, algorithms do not just have addictive features; they have knowingly toxic features, because what the most toxic aspects of our nature causes engagement. Anything that riles you up causes engagement. That means you get streams, that means you get money, and ultimately it's like a rattling of the cage, and a rattling of the cage of all of society. So it's very nice to see that this was won by the plaintiff. They were awarded $3 million. They were found as having created faulty design products. Now, this is a landmark case because this could be brought to a point where it's kind of like tobacco. Nicotine in and of itself is addictive. These design qualities in and of themselves are negative / addictive, and could actually cause reform for these platforms if these were seen as illegal, practices. So that in and of, I think that some of the things that we're talking about when we talk about banning social media for younger people comes from these aspects. And if we would do better design choices, if it was a better product, we might not have to do that.
Yeah, it's a really good point that this was a tiny fine, $3 million to Instagram and $3 million fine for YouTube, but a really big deal if this can actually change the product. I told you that I was I was ranting 2015, 16, 17, however long Cambridge Analytica was going on. I was like, look at what's happening here. And Facebook ended up paying $5 billion in 2019. And the stock's more than doubled since then, and it kind of came and went. Google, same thing. Like, every single, all of these GDPR infractions didn't seem to matter in the long term. But this, I feel, has we're in a moment right now, and I'm going to turn it over to Xandros to wrap it up. But a big topic that we've been digging into, especially this week and last week, after GDC, is this idea that we started talking about age verification. Roblox really kicked off that discussion. And I'm going to share my screen and just show everyone the report that we wrote, just in case you want to take a look at it. So age rage beyond Roblox, online age verification becomes the norm. So we put that out just before GDC. And what we're thinking about now is something even more interesting, which is this idea of proof of human and AI agents alongside that. So the real first question in our mind is this a person? Is this a person? Is this a human person? Oh, and by the way, AI agents are going to be a thing. Is this AI agent, kind of a part of a person's crew? verified by a person, permissioned by a person, etc. And then we can talk about age verification, kind of more as a feature. Xandros, preview us. Just give us a tidbit on our report. It's gonna come out, I think, Saturday morning. So stay tuned, everyone, on our Substack. But Xandros, go ahead.
Yes, I'll give a quick preview of that. I think we realized over the last few weeks as we put out the age verification, it was somewhat age verification as a standalone topic is somewhat short-sighted. And as we're seeing more people being able, everyday people being able to run armies of AI agents from their bedroom, it's going to become really important that we're able to identify who is a human and who's in a bot, and then more, who does that bot belong to? Who is it working for? And then, as Angela said, we'll talk about age verification after that, because it doesn't really matter if we have age verification if who you're trying to verify is not a human. How are we going to deal with that? I mean, it's a lot larger questions. And one thing that keeps coming back as a grounding principle, and it's funny you brought up Cambridge Analytica, was privacy. And this has been something we talked about, the second half of the Game Souk today, is how do we ensure all of these policies of proof of personhood, age verification, all of this doesn't expose personal information. And one thing that we keep coming back to is zero knowledge proofs as a possible solution for this. And, a solution that we've seen for a long time being one of the best options for not having to hand over all your personal information. And then teamed with that is world orbs, which allow you to scan your iris, and they use zero knowledge proofs to ensure that that biometric data never gets exchanged with other vendors. So this report, not to get too deep into it now, really will go into what are zero knowledge proofs, how do they work, the history of that, and then team that with how can we improve on the system we have now and look forward to what will be the issues in the future of proof of humanhood in AI bots.
Love it. Thank you all so much for coming. I forgot to give our disclaimer, which I'm going to give right now. This is not advice to buy, sell, or hold any security. These are personal opinions. We may or may not have investments in the companies we mentioned today. With that, we'll close out. Have a wonderful rest of the week and the weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.